50 different episodes where we've taken you from the very beginning, from planning your grow to equipment, nutrients, how to pop your seeds, going through the whole grow cycle, all different mediums. We've done everything you need to know about growing cannabis so far. So we're going into more detail about certain little bits of different topics to make sure that you're more fully informed on these different things in case you want to go into more detail. And one of the big important things that we would like to cover is building your own soil, because this is a great way to build your own soil. You know, you stick it in your pots. Maybe it doesn't need feeding for the whole grow. It's got loads of microbes in it, loads of nutrients in it. It's made specifically for your plants in your grow room. And it can sound complex, but really it isn't. And TG knows all about this shit. So he's going to help us go all the way through it and tell you about all the different ingredients you need, what you need to do to mix them together, how much of each ingredient you need to mix together, all that kind of shit. So this is all about TG now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Well,
and where do we even start? I mean, there's two different types of the soil which we're going to be talking about. I mean, there's super soil and living
yeah,
soil. Do you want to explain the
yeah.
difference between the two of those, TG?
Well, we could just step back, maybe a teeny half step back further before we do that, and
Okay.
just like the way I like to think, just like soil is a oft thrown around term. It's a pretty general blanket term that can mean a lot of things depending on who's saying it in what context. But the generalist, the most I guess the scientific definition of soil is just soil is a combination of minerals, organic material, microbial activity via the microbes that live in there. So it has to have some life, and as well as like air and oxygen and kind of stuff. So, but that definition doesn't really apply to what we're going to be talking about, because in the cannabis sphere we have like, I like to think of shit on a sliding scale from like inert, essentially, from you think about like DWC, deep water culture, where there is no medium, essentially, where you move to the right, if you're thinking of a left to the right line kind of sliding scale. Then you get into like cocoa and stuff, which is it's a material, but it doesn't have anything in
A
it. You
soilless medium.
exactly
Well, what about
exactly.
Pro Mix? Same thing, isn't it?
Yeah, well, any of that, even peat,
Yeah.
people can grow in perlite, anything that's not doesn't have anything in it, it's just completely inert, and you, the grower, are in full control of what's being put in or not put into it to feed your plant. Move a little bit further, you get kind of into like, I would say, like the organic aspect of shit, where like fish emulsion and stuff, where it's not quite as like precise maybe as using canna A and B with a bit of PK, with those kinds of things. And this is how I started growing, with like just regular old inert potting soil from the garden store, and using like a full spectrum fish kind of with kelp and stuff, a 3-2-5 mix essentially. Um, so again, it's not quite as like precise. And then you go even further, which is where I'm at now, into the super soil. There's a couple like sub versions or sub definitions when you get into soil, super soil, in my opinion. And again, full disclosure, this is all just what I think. It's not really based on, like, I guess I do read stuff, and I've, my recipe is based on a few different people's that I combined, but essentially, this is just what I think. So take it with a grain of salt, of course. But super soil to me is a soil or a medium that you can plant something in. It doesn't have to be cannabis, but a plant can grow in without too much, intervention from the grower. So it has like everything kind of built in for the most part. Um, my soil is I like to call it microbially fortified super soil. So you can do super soil without microbes. You can have like bone meal and blood meal and all the different stuff. If you think of it like baking a cake, right? You can eat a cake without certain ingredients, but certain other ingredients really, really make it fucking good, right? And that's the microbes, I guess, in that line of thought. And then you can go even further, which to me is the very pinnacle of, like, at least in the indoor, you can't really match Mother Nature. Like, I don't care who you are, building your own living soil and stimulating the microbes and stuff, Mother Nature will never be second, to the indoor horticulturalist. So That's the best, obviously outdoor in nice fertile soil that's there. But living soil is something that can be perpetually, you're relying on the microbes essentially to create food for the plant, um, more or less, more than you're relying on the amendments in the soil to provide food to the plant. You're feeding the microbes who then feed the plant. Where in my case with my super soil, I directly feed the plant with some assistance from the microbes, if that makes sense. So that's a long drawn out definition, but that's what I kind of think of as super soil when I'm, thinking of what I have, and when I see other people's super soil and stuff like that. Um, so yeah, how's that?
Yeah, confusing. You know.
Yeah.
So essentially, why would you use this soil over, say, a bag of soil? You just go to the shop and you get yourself you go to your Canadian Target. What's it called? Canadian Tire. That's the one, right?
Yeah.
You head
Canadian
there,
Tire, yeah.
get yourself some
Canadian Tire.
get yourself some soil in the bag. Why
Sure.
would you not use that? Why would you prefer to build your own soil? Why do you build your own soil rather than using that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of reasons. The one you hear probably most is like assuming you're using organic inputs and trying to I like to think I'm trying to mimic Mother Nature as best as I can in a very awful, horrible way, as best, because I'm a human indoors. But that's the intention, is to try and replicate Mother Nature in your tent. But the reason I did it, in the beginning was because I used to work up north as a geologist looking for uranium and stuff. And Cheryl, my partner, is not super green thumb. She's like a chemist, but not super intuitive with the plants. So she could measure out the shit, but so my solution was just to build this thing that she could just add water to for 3 weeks when I was away, and nothing bad would happen. And so I did a bunch of reading, and most of my recipe comes from a combination of Subcool, Vic High, and Tom Hill. They're kind of recipes that are all available in Jorge Cervantes' Cannabis Encyclopedia, big purple book. And so I blended them all together and kind of made something that had the right proportions of nutrients and everything to grow for the general period that I tend to grow, which is about 100 to 120 days for a total cycle to be done. And found local inputs, because I'm not going to be ordering shit from far away and paying expensive shipping and stuff. I'm super lazy, and I prefer to the whole carbon footprint aspect of it is important, because my recipe, for example, has locally, I make my own compost that I put in it, so there's not any burning of fossil fuel shit that's involved with with that. So you can do that in a lot of different ways. If you have chickens and stuff, make your own chicken manure and find local farmers and blah blah blah, which we'll get into in a bit when we get into the ingredient part. But so there's an environmental aspect to it. I think is you could argue if you did source your ingredients properly, it would probably be better than bottled nutrients in terms of that. And a lot of people say it tastes better, when you grow quote unquote organically. There's that whole argument where, is that better than traditional?
Yeah, that seems
I
to be
don't
something
know.
to do with the microbes, isn't it? And bacteria seems to help the trichomes grow a particular way and the terpenes develop in a particular way. That's an
Yeah,
interesting
I
topic, man.
completely believe that. I mean, whether or not one's better than the other, I don't think is a winnable argument, because better means something different to everyone, right? So, but yeah, all the other stuff, if you're growing your own shit and your inputs and stuff, making compost and things like this, then probably you could argue that yours is better for the environment. But so there's a lot of different reasons, but for me it was just because I needed something that was easy, basically. And
so essentially
water.
what you're doing is you get in a soil and you're loading it with all of the nutrients the plant's gonna need throughout its whole life cycle, and you're loading that soil with all of those nutrients, so you don't have to give it anything but water
100%.
throughout the whole grow. And sometimes microbes will be used because that will help break down what's inside of the medium and make it more plant available to the plants.
Yeah.
And that's the
It's
difference
not
between
quite
living and soil. Like super soil is just loaded with the newts, and the plant will take it as it needs it. And then living soil
That's right.
is like the bacteria would make the get the nutrients from the soil and feed it to the plant essentially.
Yeah, the ingredients that you're using are like slow release, non-burning type things that, that are traditionally just they're traditional horticultural ingredients that I use in mine. It's nothing like special.
Yeah.
But yeah, it grows good plants. Just like, I'm growing some peppers and some basil right now, and it also works for other plants.
Do you ever need to feed your plants more? Like, does the soil get it from
Yeah,
germination
and
to
that
harvest without using nutrients?
it's a good question, and I would say it varies. Because all plants don't eat the same, right? Some eat a lot less, some eat a lot more. Occasionally, I do run into problems with deficiencies. Mostly, it's because it's my fault, though. To be honest, I run them too long. But if you use a bigger pot, then you wouldn't run out. I don't know why I'm so cheap. Usually, I'm like, oh yeah, 1.5 gallon. That'll be enough. And then like 4 weeks into flower, they start fading, and I'm like, fuck, like, why didn't I just put it in a goddamn three gallon and only fill it, 2 gallon or whatever. Anyway, so it depends on the plant, and again, in my case, I tend to just like veg shit out way too long and then get them way too big. But yeah, the idea is very generally with my recipe that I think it's on Percys. If you go there, it's up there. But it's what do I have? Like, it's about a 40-day veg. So like when you put the seed in it, you have about 40 to 50 days, I would say. 50 is like really kind of pushing it, of vegging before you can flip it. And then on a typical kind of 8 to 9 week flowering plant, which most are these days, maybe you're getting into like, maybe there's a lot more 9s and 10s these now, but between 9 and 10 or 8 and 10 weeks, generally, again, it really depends on the cultivar. That's usually enough to get it through till and to have a nice fade and have pretty depleted soil by the end of things. So that was always my plan.
So where do you start, man? What ingredients do you need to build this soil?
Yeah. Well, I think the most important thing is you need a base, the inert part, because like most of this is not food, right? If it was all food, that'd be way too hot and it would kill your shit if you just try to grow it in bone meal. So most of it is, I use local, well, not in the local, it comes from Lower Mainland in BC, but I buy it at Costco, and it's just big ass bales of composted wood bark and peat is the mixture with a little bit of perlite.
Okay, let's just go back a second, right? Let's say we're doing a 4-plant grow. You say
Okay.
each pot is going to have, say, 25 liters in each pot, right? That would be about right for this kind of soil.
This is where I generally don't put that much in. When you hear living soil, super soil, people are like using these fucking huge pots. I'm in 1.5 to 3 gallon. My biggest pot I own is a 6 gallon, which is like pretty big, 24 liters, 23 liters. So, but I only use that as like a mother pot that I'm growing something out for a year in and filling a 3x3 or a 4x4 or something in.
Right.
But no, most of my stuff is like 3 gallon is my choice, and probably like more like 2.8 gallon because I don't quite fill them full. But the 25 gallon ones, like that's more for like the living soil.
No, 25 liter.
Or 25 liter. What is that in gallon?
What, 5-6 liters?
Six gallons.
6 gallons. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of like I think the minimum people like for the living soil type shit, where you have to have enough space for like an active microbial community to live and flourish, and not just like be there. With my soil, like I do a drench of, like, I add a compost layer when I flip the flower. Usually about 1 to 2 weeks into flower, I'll sprinkle a little bit of compost to like reinvigorate my soil with microbes. So it's not like they're in there like, and again, I've never actually looked in my soil and like checked how the microbes change over time during my grows, but whatever is happening, it seems to really work in my case. So
So let's say we're mixing up 20 gallons of this soil.
yeah,
Yeah, that would be about right. Right. So 4 or 5
yeah,
gallon pots.
yeah, 20, yeah, that's
Yeah.
about right, I guess.
So
Um,
about 80 liters. Uh,
yeah,
4 or 5 gallon pots. So how much of the base would you need? And you say you'd use like peat or cocoa for the base.
yeah. I'm just trying to think of my recipe. How fuck much do I use? I use 120 liters of base, I
Right.
think. Just because like when you're cooking this all, you do want enough, again, space in there for the microbes to start flourishing and get to where they're going to be depleted from, if you know what I mean. And
Mhm.
you also need them to like start kind of not breaking down is the wrong term, but cooking the soil in the 2 weeks of making it. But yeah, what the ratio for like 4 or 5 gallon pots, like I don't even know. Like for a
So
specific
you use
amount.
120 liters of
Yeah.
base. So how many
Yeah.
liters do you cook altogether? When it's all done, how many liters do you have?
Yeah, probably like 130-ish,
All right,
120,
so a lot of it
130.
is made of just base then, just peat or
Yeah, yeah.
compost.
Most of it is,
Yeah, it's like more than
the second
90%.
yeah. Yeah, the other stuff like it's fairly concentrated nutrients and you do put quite a bit in it considering, but it's a slow release stuff that I use anyway in my recipe. I can't speak for other people's because a lot of other people do have problems when they plant directly into super soil you buy from the store. It burns their plants and shit.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never really had that problem with mine. But yeah, you start with a base, I would say at least like again, there's a critical minimum that you need, I think, in terms of cooking it properly and having the microbes um, flourish again in the 2 weeks that it's sitting there waiting to be used in your baking stage, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, again, I should probably just pull out my recipe. I don't even have it up. It's easier for me. I don't fucking remember it off the top of my head.
It was just I want everybody who's listening to make sure that they have exact numbers to work with, so they can they can mix it up all nice and know how much they're gonna need of what. So if they get like a
Yeah.
50-liter bag of cocoa, what kind of super soil are they gonna be able to make out of that using a 50-liter bag of cocoa as their base?
Yeah. So you like, I mean, I'm just popped it up on Percy's here, and if you just did cut it in half, so I said start out with 105 liters, so we'll just cut everything in half. So if you started with 50 liters of high quality potting soil,
So
so
that's
you'd
in
have
potting soil, not peat or cocoa. You'd use potting soil,
yeah, I like potting soil. I
right?
mean, potting soil is essentially is peat. It's
Mm-hmm.
just got
Just
might have
got a
some
little
worm
bit in there.
castings,
Yeah, yeah.
and maybe some a little bit of compost and a little bit of perlite. But you could use peat. Yeah, peat is fine as well
Mm-hmm.
because you're going to be putting in. You just might have to add a little bit more perlite in the end in terms of drainage. So yeah, 50 liters of that. And like again, I just go down to the store and like I don't buy Miracle Grow soil if I can help it. Like none of the bigger branded stuff, just the most basic stuff that you can get and the most local stuff you can get is what I stress. Right. Um, worm castings, you need about, I guess, 5 to 10 liters. Well, five, yeah, of worm castings, which is a fair amount. Um, you can make your own worm
Yeah, not if you've got a
castings.
worm farm. It's pretty easy to get that.
Yeah. So if there's local sources of that, we have a couple people I can go to here and buy worm stuff from. And most garden stores do sell it as well. But the further away from you, the more processed it gets, the crappier it is generally. So yeah, you're gonna want 50 liters of soil, then about 5 to 10 liters um, of worm castings. Don't go too hard on the worm castings. And again, these amounts aren't like you can be within 10%. You don't have to be exactly on 10 liters. But yeah, the worm castings don't go too hard on because they're fairly dense and they can clog up your soil if you have a ton of them in there, and it makes drainage a little bit tricky. So then next, What I use is blood meal. These are controversial, blood and bone meal, but I use blood meal. I don't give a fuck. It's there. It's a product of the slaughter industry, I know, but I mean, as long as people are eating beef, that shit's gonna be there. So we might as well use it for something productive.
It's not like they're harvesting cows just to get
No.
blood meal from them.
Exactly. Yeah. If
Yeah.
they were harvesting for their blood, I'd be like, yeah, no, I'll find something else. But you know, I like blood meal. It's always easy to find, um, pretty cheap, and really good nitrogen content. It doesn't have anything else in it except nitrogen, and it's pretty good for microbial encouragement. They enjoy that stuff. The worm castings, again, just to go back quickly, I use are for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, like the NPK, but they don't really have too much in them. Generally, they're more for like micronutrients and also to like kind of encourage microbial development. Um, so yeah, after the bone meal, that was 1.5 cups of that in my recipe. And again, this is just my recipe. So we'll go over alternatives and stuff after we're done here that you can use in terms of other stuff than what I use, because maybe this stuff's not available for you where you are or whatever. So bone meal is also from the slaughter industry. I use steamed bone meal, 3 cups of that, quite a bit more. Phosphorus is important, root development and other things. I think in flour as well, it's pretty good. Plants eat the shit out of it, and this one is important also to have a good cook of your soil. Like you want to make sure it's properly I don't know what else to call it, cooked.
Yeah, and
Because bone meal,
we seen in the chat there from Rustin Else, I think he said you can use the term resting because we don't want to lead people into the idea that you're going to cook this shit in the oven for a
yeah,
certain amount of time. It don't go on gas mark 8 for 40
rested.
minutes. Or
No,
any
you're
shit
just
like
letting
that.
it. You're fermenting it, whatever. Letting the microbes fucking
Once
get
it's mixed, just let it
comfortable.
sit there and do its thing for a couple of weeks.
Yeah,
We actually did have somebody at Percy's that did actually cook their soil on top of a stove once. So yeah, don't do that.
But people do
that's-
that to like if you get shit out the garden and you want to make sure all the bugs are dead, then you can cook your soil
Yeah, you
like
can
that. But you're
sterilize
gonna
it in the
kill a
oven.
lot of shit in there, and your house will
But
stink. So don't do that.
yeah,
This
don't do
house will
that.
smell like shit, literally. Yeah.
Yeah, the bone meal though is just microbial activity is important to help make the bone meal or the phosphorus in the bone meal available. So yeah, that's I put a lot of bone meal in it. There's a little bit of nitrogen in it too, which is great, and calcium as well. Lots of calcium in bone meal, obviously. So after that, I'm using some dolomitic lime because it's got calcium and magnesium. It's quite slow release, so I'm not really using for the calcium and magnesium per se. It's more for a soil buffer in terms of helping it keep it kind of nice and sweet, not super acidic, not super basic, I guess. So yeah, it's a great amendment. It's very cheap, and it lasts quite a long time. And afterwards, when hopefully you compost your soil ball like I do, it will persist most likely in that soil ball, and then it'll become part of your compost that you can use again and again and again. So it's a gift that keeps on giving, that dolomitic lime. Don't use that's the other kind of lime, calcium based stuff. Dolomitic lime is calcium, magnesium, uh, carbonate, and then the other one is just calcium carbonate.
Right.
Yeah, we want magnesium in that. Then next, sorry, what did I say? 3 cups of dolomitic lime. Cut that in half. 1.5 cups of dolomitic lime.
Right. Okay.
I apologize. Yeah, so 3 cups of bone meal, 1.5 of dolomitic lime. Next, I use 1 heaping cup of Epsom salts in my normal recipe. You could probably get away with still putting in maybe not a heaping cup, but just like a regular, nicely trimmed cup of Epsom salts. This is magnesium sulfate. It's there for the magnesium mainly, and the sulfurs. Sulfur is a very important nutrient in growth of cannabis as well. But it's quite soluble in water, so magnesium sulfate, Epsom salts get washed out or used up quite quickly as the soil is watered and stuff. So that one I do give my plants a shot of it every once in a while. But yeah, in the initial mix, you're gonna want about, I would say, 1 cup, like nicely trimmed, not like overflowing cup.
Right.
Epsom salts,
A
and
cup
I
is
buy
about,
mine.
what is a cup? Is like 240, 250 milliliters or
Oh
something.
yeah, sorry, 250 milliliter.
Okay.
Yep, or 8 ounces for you imperialists. Yeah.
Mhm.
And yeah, the Epsom salts I use, I know people say, buy them from the garden store, Mermanure, but I buy mine from just the grocery store in those big plastic jugs.
Yeah,
Just
man.
make sure you get the USP, which is United States Pharmacopoeia, which means I think that it's just purely that.
Yeah,
It's just
you don't want
magnesium sulfate.
scented magnesium salts. You just want
No.
straight up, just 100% magnesium sulfate. That's what you
Yeah.
want.
If it's got flowers and shit on the label, like be like, probably don't get that.
Probably not.
Just should
Buy
be
the
white crystals. That's
the
all.
cheap generic stuff.
Yeah. I buy
Right.
like 4 kilos for $12. So it's
Mhm.
way cheaper than the plant specific. And maybe there's something different. I don't know. But so far I've had no issues in like, the 12 years I've been fucking growing. So
Mhm.
and then the next part is really important, especially if initially you didn't buy the regular potting soil kind of mix. Because potting soil generally has a bit more drainage based on what it's made of than just pure peat.
Mhm.
So perlite and vermiculite is the next one, and it says 5 to 10 liters. That's a very, very vague thing. Some people, if you want more drainage, if you want your soil to dry out quicker but drain better, put more perlite in. If you want it less, then put less in, but be aware that if you put too much less, then you're going to have issues with drainage and possibly clogging, and you get root issues and shit. More is better if you're going to do anything, but yeah, I would say like 5 liters of perlite. I like perlite because it's readily available. Vermiculite, it's not so much of an issue anymore, but it used to be mined in asbestos derived kind of areas, and it could be contaminated with asbestos because the mineral is it's associated with asbestos minerals basically.
Mhm.
But not so much anymore because there's high regulations on that shit. But just vermiculate's generally a lot more expensive and better used for other things like growing mushrooms.
Yeah.
Um, so stick with perlite. Rice hulls are an organic alternative. I've never personally used rice hulls, but apparently they're pretty good.
They break
Provide
down
some,
over time, don't they? And feed back
yeah,
a bit.
they'll break
Yeah.
down. They provide a bit of silica too, which I'm not too concerned with. But yeah, rice hulls are another option. So and then what's next? 5 heaping spadefuls of sifted compost.
Well, you're
There you
using
go.
half of that though. Say
Yeah, so a couple heaping spadefuls. So like I don't know what that is. Maybe 2 liters, 3 liters of compost. Compost is a pretty flexible thing. The more you put in, the better, really. To a point, you don't want it all compost, but
Mhm.
compost is weird because it both helps with drainage as well as prevents excess drainage. It gives you a shit ton. This is where I impart my microbial activity because, again, like I said, I make my own compost and I have a bunch of endogenous microbes that are chilling. So when I make my teas and just mix it in with the soil, they get mixed in as well. So compost is really important. If you can't get compost, it's okay. Try and get some steer manure or composted steer manure or sheep manure are my 2 choices. Animal manure again is kind of like a lot of people don't like to use it. Animal byproducts, the vegan crowd, all that kind of stuff. But
It's gonna be
if
really
it's
hot as well if you gotta let the manure
yeah,
break down for 6 months or
yeah,
so
you
with some compost.
you don't want to just be following the cow and collecting the shit that's falling out of the ass. But if it's in the store in a bag, hopefully it's been properly decomposed and composted and stuff. And that's what I buy. I just go to Canadian Tire and buy like $3 bag of steer manure. That's generally available. But if it's not, then yeah, compost or that because these are kind of where your microbes will come from. Cow shit's not the sweetest to use for microbes,
Mhm.
but there's other ways
Unless
to
you're
get them.
growing cheese.
Yeah, or I mean fungus, I guess. It grows on the patties, right? Those teachers that are golden.
Mhm.
But yeah. So what's that? That's it. That's all I got.
So round that up for us. What is it again? How many liters of which?
So 50 plus, say 55 liters. And then perlite is another 560. And then I don't know, I would say 65 liters like total volume, because the rest, like the blood meal and the bone meal, they don't take up much room, right? They're more like amendments than a medium.
Yeah. So
So yeah,
55 liters of the potting soil. And how many? A quarter? No, a quarter of a liter, 250 milliliters of. Which was it? The bone meal, the blood milk bone meal.
yeah, 1.5 cups blood meal, which is 250
Times 3.
3.
Yeah.
Fuck.
So
Yeah, sorry, I
750.
don't have it in metric, even though I'm in Canada, which is funny, but I'm all about cups, you know.
Yeah, a cup is just 250 milliliters.
Yeah,
So
so you got to do the
close.
math, I suppose. But yeah. So then yeah, after you collected all of that, if you're gonna make my recipe, again, this is my recipe, but there's other recipes out there you can try. I use one of those kiddie pools, you know, like the little paddling
The
pool or
paddling
whatever
pool,
you.
yeah.
Yeah. But I just use that as like a big tub, and I dump all of this shit in there all together. And then I take my rake and I mix it up, uh, you know, like you would a cake batter with a spoon, but use a rake. Mix it all up really, really good, kind of so it looks homogeneous, the same kind of texturally everywhere. There's not big patches of perlite here and like cow shit over there or whatever. You want it kind of even looking as best you can. So it is a bit laborious in that sense. This is again how I do it. A lot of people, if you're more mechanically inclined, you could build some sort of tumbling drum, like a cement mixer type thing, and toss everything in there and roll it around. That would work great. I would love to have one of those, but I'm pretty shitty at building stuff, so I don't have one. But yeah,
So would you add any water to this? So it's in the paddling pool. You just
yeah. Well, after I've mixed it, usually when I'm adding my water is after it's kind of sitting there mixed. I take 1 gallon usually, and I'll sprinkle it with my watering wand, but a watering can works just as well. Just don't have it like dumped in one spot. Kind of, you want to evenly distribute it as best you can. Water your soil and give it a good mix around to kind of mix the water around. And then after that, I'm putting it in a big, huge barrel that I have, which again is kind of like, you know, not everybody has room for this or access to big barrels with lids on them and shit. You can use like tubs. I know somebody that used like just a big Rubbermaid tub and just kind of mixed it around every once in a while in there. They didn't, because what I like the drum for is then I can roll it, right? Because you do want to mix the stuff. You don't want to let it just like stratify, and the stuff at the bottom won't have access to oxygen, which is really important for the microbes that you want to proliferate in your soil to have access to, because they'll die if they don't. And then bad ones, the anaerobics, will start coming up, and those ones are not good. If your soil starts smelling like dead bodies and stuff, which it can, like because of the bone meal and stuff, yeah, you want to get some oxygen in there ASAP. So that's why I like the rolling ability. And if you had a big drum like a cement mixer type thing, that would be perfect, because you could always just open it up, infuse some oxygen, roll it around, get that kind of mixed in there. But yeah, for me, I fill up my drum, put on a lid, kick it on its side, and then roll it around in my yard.
I use a mixing auger, like a 36-inch mixing auger, and a drill. Just punch it down and pull up.
Yeah,
and it works.
perfect.
I know exactly what you're talking about, though. Just aerate it.
Yeah, any way you can get air in it. Air is important. Same, you know, just like with anything, compost is the same. The good microbes need oxygen, just like us. So
would you leave it just sitting there in that tub for like 2 weeks and just roll it around every couple of days or something?
Basically, yep. If you can do it daily, like that's cool. But yeah, at least kind of every 2 to 3 days. Ideally, you want it in a warmer environment. You don't want it like borderline freezing, like 0 degrees or 32 Fahrenheit or whatever. But you know, warm enough so then the microbes will be like, oh man, it's warm in here. Let's get eating, guys, and do their shit. Probably what they say. Because yeah, you know, just like with anything, to a point, you know, you don't want to cook them. Like again, I shouldn't. That's an appropriate use of that word.
Yeah.
But
So
yeah, too hot is not good. But
so where would you get these ingredients from as well? You can get them all from a normal store, right?
that's where I get mine. I stress very much that you should support your local businesses and your garden stores and stuff, you know, because, you know, as much as I love Canadian Tire, they're a big box store, and I like the little garden shops.
So you can make your own compost, and you can make your own
Yes.
worm castings after a while when you get a worm farm, which we'll be covering in next week's grow guides. So,
Yes.
so if you do, and when when you source these things locally, the microbes are going to be more applicable to your local area as well. So,
Mhm.
and that's something you want to be looking out for when you build this soil, is making it so your plants will be immune to different pathogens that from the environment it lives in. So if you use local microbes, the more likely to be immune to things as well.
That's right. That's always been my thought. You know, anything that's bad around here is probably fighting with the good shit. So if I can get the good shit in my soil, probably that's an IPM measure already there, right? It's
I've seen sometimes people put rock dust in and shit like that. Do you not use any of that?
no, rock dust is cool. You know, I'm a geologist, so I'm a big fan of rocks and their dust.
It's more like a slow release of nutrients, so that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's that shit is super slow. And honestly, there's not a ton of nutritional value in it. Like it's not like it's super slow, and but you know, your plant can't live on fucking granite dust just for the potassium that's in the feldspar that's in the granite, right? Like and again, it takes a lot to break that shit down depending on the mineralogy of the shit. You need some serious time and some serious microbes and usually a pretty acidic environment. So like to me, rock dusts are applicable in something like a living soil where you're going to reuse it multiple times, like over years, I would say. Because again, it's not immediately available, and if you're just dumping it in for like the way I use mine for a 90-day or 100-day grow, probably it's not even going to be touched by the time I dump my soil into the compost, because I don't reuse my soil in the sense where I put a new plant in the same block. I put my blocks in the compost bin, which I then use the compost in a new batch of soil, kind of closing the loop that way.
Right.
But and again, rock dust would be good to have in your compost. And again, like Rusty Nails has said, you know, the worms, you know, they use it as grit and shit like than other things. But like, I don't think I need to add that to get that. So I don't do basalt rock dust or glacial whatever moraine rock dust, granite, crushed granite.
Marge, you've used
greenstone.
TG soil before, right?
Yeah, I have. Yep. I did everything that he said. I bought all my stuff at Canadian Tire. But they are not corporately owned. I believe they're
Yeah, I
franchise.
mean,
So there's that. It's
I
really
like
close to
Canadian
my
Tire, don't
house.
get me wrong.
I just mixed mine up. I had to mix mine up in like a big tote because I wasn't about to go out and buy a kiddie pool just to do that, because I'm pretty sure my husband would be like, where the fuck are we going to keep this after you're done with it? But it worked. It worked great. I have to make some more this year actually. And one of the reasons I started doing it is because I'm composting too, and I'm looking for ways to use my compost. So yeah.
So you amend this shit, do you, TG?
Sometimes it depends on the grow. Like I don't know if I posted anything. I think I posted somewhere about I just recently did a grow of these auto double grape, or I should say quadruple grape. Hopefully I don't get sued. But they're a 65-day auto. So like seed to cut, it was 65 days. And I was like, fuck, that's not it's super fast. But I didn't have to do anything but water those. That's it. Water in a 1 gallon pot, even. So like 3.8 liters. Very small. Ish. Smells like onions too. It's fucked. Didn't get any grape. Super resinous, but it might be a good breeding plant. But yeah, the onions are a bit off-putting. Anyway, so in that case, no, I don't have to add anything. But in another case, like I have these Forbidden Dream in my 4x4 that I have in 4-gallon pots, so 16 liter, and I veg them like, I monster crop them, and I was like, oh, I'll just train them for another week. Oh, just a few more days, blah, blah, blah. And they're fucking huge now. And we all know plants when they go into flower, they're using a shit ton of energy, and like those secondary metabolites are not simple molecules, right? They need a lot of stuff to build THC and CBD and all the terpenes and stuff.
Mhm.
So like those atoms come from somewhere, and that somewhere is the nutrients. And so they're eating a shitload. And yeah, I have to amend. So when I amend, I go back to my old favorite fish hydrolysate preferably, and kelp.
Where would you get
Um,
fish hydrolysate from? That sounds like a complex one.
Not really. It's usually at the garden store in the organic section.
Okay.
If they have it. Hydrolysate or fish emulsion is generally a bit more common.
Mhm.
Emulsion is not maybe as good, just because the processing is it takes a lot of the good stuff away, whereas hydrolysate is like a cold process where it preserves a lot of the good shit that comes with the fish. Some people say it imparts a fishy flavor into the weed, but I never really had anybody tell me the weed smells like fish or tastes like fish yet. So
Mhm.
I don't know if that's
Oh.
a tuna kush or something, right?
Well, I have harvested fishy tasting weed using that stuff before, but this is way long ago, and I'm sure that I didn't do a lot of shit right.
Yeah. No, I don't use a ton of it. It's pretty usually it's kind of just more like a little bit of a supplement. If I notice there's a teeny bit of fade, I'll feed like maybe once a week or something like
Mhm.
that. Fish, like, and these products, especially kelp, is exceptionally good for microbes to eat. They quite enjoy that as well. So it's not just for the plants. Plants, there's sarkinins and other plant growth hormones and shit in kelp that are good, but it's also for the microbes, as is the fish. Um, so yeah, usually I'll do a little bit of fish if I need to. Epsom salts I do tend to have a bit of an issue with magnesium deficiency if I do have any deficiency, and I think that's just because the dolomitic lime, again, it's a rock dust. It's crushed dolomite, which is calcium magnesium carbonate, and therefore it's not super available in a short period of time. It's more, again, for the buffering capacity that it provides. So Epsom salts are another thing that I'll use as a supplement, and just a quick shot of, I think Jorge in his purple book, that's that's what
Cannabis
I've always followed,
encyclopedia.
is 2 teaspoons per gallon until morale improves.
Right.
So that's it though. Nothing like, no sprinkling of this or that or dry amendments on the top surface or anything.
Just water for the whole grow.
Yeah.
So this soil is
And
pretty
then
good to build if you want to run an auto, then especially because it's going to last about 12 weeks.
yeah, it's great for autos actually. Yeah,
Mhm.
great. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
I've used it for autos for my outdoor
yeah,
grows.
yeah. And I should say, this is my soil, and there's other things you can substitute in for the ingredients I use if things aren't available to you, or there's just other super soil mixes too. But yeah, building your own is like the way to go. It's just like anything, it's cheaper, and you control what goes in it. You can kind of design it if you're growing long flower shit, like the 16-week stuff where you need that extra oomph. Maybe you can use bigger pots and design your soil to provide more nitrogen for longer or something like
Mhm.
that. But yeah, this works fairly generally in my experience. You still do need to have a bit of like ability to recognize if things are going a bit weird, because the pH does get fucky sometimes, and so you got to give it a good flush to refresh the medium and wash out whatever might be happening in there. But it's not quite autopilot, I would say, but I don't think really anything is, growing wise. So yeah.
When you flush your soil, what's that process? Because I know it is slightly different to say flushing cocoa.
Yeah. Well, I'm only flushing when I notice a problem generally. And like I say, it's generally with pH. You know, my leaves will it's not canoe, but it's like the opposite of canoe. You know how they curl in on themselves, sort of.
Right. Yeah.
And it's just everybody knows, well, not everybody, but a pH issue. When that pops up, I flush pretty much like anybody. I think I put in enough uh water, like, you know, clean water through it. Um, actually, probably not, because I'm more going on like a color thing. Usually, if there's an issue, the color is pretty fucking brown, almost coming out. The first bit of runoff, orangey brown. And so as that fades, then I'm like, okay, whatever the fuck that was is gone. And in all my years of growing, that's like whatever that is, washing that out, just like it's like injecting the shit with steroids. The next day they're just like, fucking let's go, you know. It's crazy. And it's happened outside when I've grown petunias too. I was like, what the fuck is wrong with these things? They just look like shit. Yellow leaves, nasty. And then I watered them and this like ooze of orange came out. And I was like, oh fuck. Like, I don't know if the microbes are just like, you know, that one pot they didn't get along or what's going on. I really should like try to do more science shit on this, but like again, flushing tends to fix the problem. And yeah, I'm just dumping water through until this fucking color fades. You put enough water through to know that like it's washed for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
And you just let it drip out, and you can't really overwater unless you have a soil that you've kind of messed up and not, you don't have proper drainage, so it like holds the water really badly.
Yeah.
My soil really does like drain good, and then it dries out quite quickly again, especially if you have a good robust plant in there that's drinking hard too. So
Yeah. So I mean, even with all your amendments and everything, though, you're not worried about potentially washing it through and then having to yeah. The only again, I'm just asking because it's one of those things that I think people, you know, they hear the word flush and then the next minute they're stressing for that reason, or have I flushed out all the good stuff and stuff like that. So
in the final bit of water that I put through, I might add a bit of Epsom salts, because again, those are fairly water soluble and they will wash out. So, but and Epsom salts are fairly benign too. You know, unless you're fucking putting a shitload in, you don't really overdose them on that too easy.
Yeah.
So I might replenish that, but yeah, the flush is, you know, the super soil ingredients are built to be robust enough not to wash out. I think like blood meal is not soluble in water. Some of it is, like you get it wet and there's something that dissolves and washes away, but it's not like salt where it's like instantly dissolved and instantly gone.
yeah.
So yeah, in my experience, if I do have to flush, it doesn't really affect the nutritional capacity or whatever is left of that in the soil until the end.
Sweet.